First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Here we are again.
Here we are again is it on my own? Well, that, oh God.
Anyway,
but you'll kind of, but you'll do that. Like you'll be like violently ill or something. You'll be like, I'm gonna go work 13-hour shifts here. I'm gonna smoke 12,000 cigarettes. I'm a dumb guy.
it's true. It's sadly true. Well, what are you gonna do, girl?
I don't know. Oh, okay. Not into the microphone. Your microphone is right there.
Whatever.
We have to care
People
for
like
our
me because I'm
listeners.
transparent.
Is that what they like?
That's what Courtney said.
I actually do think people really like that.
Yeah, they love you for, showing us what AI will look like in the future. No, I'm just joking.
I get it. I understand the comparison.
No, you're not. No, you keep us on. No.
No, I know why you say that. But what's funny is I don't think I'm. I think you say that because I seem emotionally impenetrable. That's what I think.
LOL at the words emotionally impenetrable. Oh, darling, you're just saying that because I seem emotionally impenetrable.
How much do we hate this shirt?
What shirt?
Look
Your
at the shirt I'm wearing. That's really bad.
What is it? It's no, it's fine. It's good to be human. Show up. We're gonna talk about that. You're not wearing a great shirt today. It's okay.
I don't mind. This bought it from the thrift store. Why did I spend $30 on this shirt?
On a chipped?
Well, no, it's not chipped. That's just the design.
That's like the design?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, very cool. These are Tom Ford glasses that Nina took from a lost and found at the theater. They were there for like 2 weeks. So she took them. And they didn't fit her, so she gave it to me, and they were like super expensive.
Nice. Well, don't lose them.
The end. Well, I probably will. Let's be real. All right.
Today, ladies and germs, we're talking about
coffee.
Aren't you drinking coffee?
Yeah, I need it. I need this now.
Okay.
Oh.
I also, when I looked into the microphone, you're like, oh, I need coffee. As you're
I got so twisted on fucking Sunday night. I haven't been that twisted in a while. I got twisted, bro. We had fun. We went to the Russian Samovar. Have you ever been there?
No.
Oh, it is a very cool spot. I've never been there before. It's on 52nd. It's right across the street from the August Wilson.
Uh-huh.
And it's like a Russian bar and restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a cool place, cool vibes. But we were partying, dude. That's all.
Fun.
But now let's talk about the digital world.
So, and I'm excited to talk about this today, because we're essentially going to talk about. Well, I'll just read you the title. It says it all. Showing up as a digital citizen, the real way to grow an online community, and I mean, we'll get into all the reasons we're going to talk about this, but in a nutshell, the digital age has pushed us so much more beyond, okay, gotta be online in order for people to see what you're up to, gotta, that's how you grow your business, or, oh, I'm just on there for socials to see what my friends are. Now there's an expectation that there's a whole world, a whole other world, where if you are not actively, specifically growing a community, and as we're saying, showing up as a digital citizen, the question is, not to be so capitalist, but do you exist? And I mean, you obviously exist, but will you be able to move the needle without the support of that online community?
Well,
Please.
it's funny because I'm just gonna repeat what you said, but just break it down a bit more, which is like, I think for many of us, not the most tech person, digital people, whatever, you know, we're always, and you still hear actors say it. It's like, oh, I gotta get my website, all my social media. I gotta post on social media. It's like it's still seen as, we used to break, and we still do. We break down sort of like what a business is into 7 tenets, right? Which is like professional growth, which is goal setting and sort of understanding whatever industry you're trying to break into, community cultivation, financial management, marketing, self-producing, craft improvement, workflow, method, in other words, right? So these are the things that make up a business. And so not the mistake, but the realization we've had is we kind of agreed with a lot of artists, which is like, oh, so the digital realm is marketing. So it's a piece of my business, right? So social media, my website, YouTube, whatever. This is a piece of my business that I use for promoting my work as an artist, right? And promoting myself. What I think has shifted is now it is just an entirely different world. It's almost like a different market, right? It's like what I'm doing, I mean, but even more so. It's like, cause what I'm doing, it's like New York and the West End are different markets where you have to employ different strategies. You have to know different people. You have, there's different levels of relevancy. It's like the digital world online is a completely different world where if you're running a good business online, you have to do all 7 of those tenets. And this is like, I hope that's clear because that's like, oh, it's not a tool anymore. That this is sort of what I mean. It used to be a tool to promote yourself. Now it's not a tool, it's a space to exist in and employ tools. That is drastically different. And let me just say, because this next question, why would you choose to engage in this digital world? I mean, frankly, it's where the attention is. People are spending, it's funny, right? Like more YouTube is watched on televisions than all streaming services combined and cable. It's like, how much time are people spending on TikTok? How much time are people spending now with remote work, right? They're on their computers constantly. So right now, people are sitting in front of their computers or looking at their phones, for better or for worse, a majority of the day, right? And so that's where attention is.
Well,
So,
and I just want to say, we've been talking more and more about literally and figuratively, we've been talking about moving art online. And I'm saying this because when you say that about people consuming all of that YouTube content or all social content or just that being the world is. So where is the art within that world? Where is your art within that world? And this is something that I really believe we know this. The younger generation of artists, they understand this. They're doing this. They're doing it. It's what they understand. It's what they grew up with. I would argue that millennials and older, maybe even I don't know, 25 and up, because when as this has really been changing, there's a barrier for entry here into considering what this is, because I still think that for so many of us, we're like our beautiful precious art that lives only within the bounds of these 4 walls. And obviously we're talking primarily about theater artists in some regard, but this is really true for all artists. How is art moving online? How are you going to community around it?
well, and the other thing is, and we'll kind of talk about this, but now I'm going to get conspiratorial for a second here.
Okay.
But there's an allergy, when if I say like abandon the real quote real world, there's 2 different worlds. You need to run a successful business, you need to become a citizen of this world online. Of course, understandably so, people are like, what? Like, why would I abandon? It's like the idea of the metaverse scares the shit out of people, right? It's like, why would I ever do that? Why would I abandon real life to be primarily a digital citizen? And,
Well,
in a way, and this is where I'll get really quick, it's like the Matrix, right? It's like, this is probably how the Matrix begins. It's like, in 150 years, if we stay down this path, like, will everything just be digital? Will everything just be the online world, and our bodies, like the physical world is going to be left behind? Like, this is sort of like where my mind goes, is like, that's the direction we're heading in a lot of ways, is, people just upload their consciousness into the fucking digital realm and exist, as an avatar in the digital world, and they're in the physical world will, it's like Ready Player One. You know what I mean? It's like that.
I do. I separate from that idea of what the future is going to look like in terms of like how we, are we, like you're saying, uploading our entire subconsciouses to a platform, which probably. I don't want to say anything about the real world versus the fake world, because this is where I think our problem lies for many people.
Mm-hmm.
They think about them as separate worlds. And here, and I'm bringing this up because I actually think that we can still live a full present in the moment physical life. The challenge is how the fuck do we put it online as well.
Well, see,
And,
to me, yeah, I guess I
and
somewhat disagree with that.
I know we're going to talk about engagement, and I know we're going to talk about like literally living in the world of the bubble. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think that thinking about them is like, when you start, yes, conceptually, there's two separate worlds makes total sense. But when you start to enact it process wise, you know this about me. I can't think of it as like, I've got this whole world and then I'm managing a whole other world over here. I need to find a through line into how these things coexist. Otherwise, at least from a workflow standpoint, I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do? So that's what I
Yeah,
mean. That's what I mean by sort of them sort of melding together as opposed to sort of living totally
yeah.
separately. But tell me what you were saying about why you disagree with that.
No, I agree with you that it's probably more. Well, I don't know, because to me that's like what's trippy about it, and I think it's true, is that, now however you have to frame it, is, oh yes, of course there's crossover, just like there's crossover between the West End and New York. But I would even argue more so online, it's even more extreme version of that, because
Mm-hmm.
there are people who are famous online, who have cachet online, who have no relevance in the quote, well, probably more so, and this is what I
That's
think is
fair.
interesting, is like, that carries more over.
Sure.
Digital fame carries more into physical world fame than physical world fame carries into digital fame.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and
And to your
relevancy.
point, actually, there are many people who truly, for the most part, only live online, who do not live
Exactly.
who do not live. So I hear that, but I want
They
to
live in
say,
chat rooms, and
but
and also, let me just quickly say, there's also completely different economies. Like, think
right,
about how different the
right,
economies are,
right.
between the physical world, physical shops, physical whatever, offering, you know, physical
Monetizing
training.
gaming, of course. Yes,
And then, like,
yes.
yeah, and it's like online, it's like it's a completely different economy in some ways. But what were you gonna
But
say?
but I think the thing that I'm just trying to get at, though, for artists in particular, is that I don't know about for you, but if I think about it, like, if I think about it as if I'm managing two different universes, who's going to do that? So, all I'm saying is, again, I'm literally going like, how these things have. There has to be a connective tissue
Right.
between what I again, there might be people out there who are listening to this who are 17 years old who completely go, no, and I'm just, this is a personal perspective that I need to find a through line between
Well, look,
those two worlds.
I'm not successful at doing this, but I would imagine the right framing is going to be viewing it like going into the office. So it's like, just like an office is its own sort of like ecosystem, right? You literally go to the office, you work 9 to 5, you come back. That's probably
I hear you.
a version of.
I actually don't think you're too wrong about that from a workflow perspective. But can I just say, and this is where it's going to depend person to person, that
Yeah.
also still could make it a bit impersonal, because part of when we're talking about showing up as a digital citizen is really creating a sense of an investment, an emotional investment. And when you look at success, actually, Mike, I forgot to tell you this. Remember, oh God, this is so funny. Remember that woman on TikTok and her two girls in Kentucky or Tennessee, the special needs girls in her
Yes.
mental health world? Well, the other day I was stoned. I was watching her late at night. She was on TikTok Live, and I requested to join the live, and she accepted. And the reason I'm telling you this is, and I'll go back to the point, but I go on there and I'm stoned, and all of a sudden she's like, "Hey, baby," she's like, "I haven't seen you request before, so I wanted to," and I'm like, "Oh, hey, Aunt D." So I'm like talking to her. Next thing I know, and Aunt D really wants to meet Al Roker. She loves Al Roker, and so I'm like kind of nervous, and I was like, "Well, I said the phrase, I grew up with him. What I meant was," and there's a reason why I'm saying this. What I meant was like, oh, Al Roker was like part of my morning childhood, right?
Oh, wow.
So then I say, and he was in a Broadway show, and I said, I'm a Broadway actor, and I'm just saying shit now. I'm just saying shit because I didn't know. I'm nervous. I'm high. And I was like, he was in Waitress, and she goes, Broadway, and like and I was like, so maybe I can like send some notes to people who, I'm just like making shit up, who are in the show with him to see if like, you and the girls could come to New York. Here, I'm actually just saying this though because everyone in the chat was like, he's lying, because I had said I grew up with him, and I didn't say that, but like people were like, hang up on him, and like I was getting so stressed because I was stoned. But also, I am obsessed with Aunt D, and this isn't a big back. I swear back to what we're talking about, because this is what I mean. The reason why Aunt D and mental health world is so popular, and then she followed me, by the way, and she messaged me, and I love that. But the reason why this is so interesting is she's so authentic, and
Yeah.
and so this is where I'm saying that. Getting back to your point, yes, from a workflow standpoint, I think you're right. Now I'm doing my job.
That's what I mean from like a workflow standpoint, not from like an
emotional, honestly, standpoint.
Emotional standpoint. Yeah. It's like because what is digital citizenship? Sorry. Is that where you were going to go?
The other point I want to say before what exactly it is just to say that because you said why choose? Yes, where it's where attention is, but this lower barrier of entry, which you kind of were getting at.
Yes, that's true.
With the point about the online world being more of an impact in the physical than vice versa, and so again, just taking the notion of art online for a moment, if you can reach so many more people with your story and your point of view and your creative self and work, why would you not?
Well, and what I'm going to say may sound sort of Orwellian, but it's like, quite literally, there's just too many barriers in the physical world. So, for instance, if I want to hang out with somebody, I gotta schedule with them. I
Right.
gotta walk out of my apartment. I gotta get on the train. I gotta go over there. Door to door an hour. I need to do all this, right? So there's a lot more quote barriers that make it harder. Now, one could argue that that could make it potentially more meaningful, but that's not really what we're talking about. Is we're talking about like on the online space, it is much easier to there's not those physical barriers, whether they be distance, whether they be resources, right? So
No.
it's like I can make things on my phone and post them. I can put out art, a version of art on my into the world. So there's just not as many hurdles to jump through, quite literally. And also, yes, of course there's people controlling algorithms and whatever. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, it's a completely democratized system, but it's certainly more democratized than, a lot of our industries are in a lot of ways. The fact of the matter is that if people, sorry, if people like your shit and it's getting likes, social media benefits from putting it out there.
Yes.
Right. Whereas in artistic industries, there is more of a
Yes. Great
picking and
point.
star making still,
Great point.
right? So it's like it doesn't matter if people like your shit. I mean, in the real world, a lot of times, how this industry is always operated, at least as acting industry, is
It's a great point.
like Hollywood, the theater are the tastemakers. They
Uh-huh.
are the ones who say people are going to we are going to make people like this. We are going to put this person in front of other people. Whereas in this world, like I said, if you post something on Instagram and it's getting likes from your followers and people are watching it, like all the way through, Instagram benefits from them
No,
putting it in front of
listen.
people.
You're. I actually think you're. I mean, lower barrier of entry is the point, but I actually just want to say what I think you're getting at a kind of a third and even more most powerful tool of all, which is simply that it gives us the individual power here. We have the individual power to uh, get our work out there in a more meaningful, powerful way.
Or even think about getting to Aunt D. Sorry, like getting to Aunt D, right? It's like somebody of a higher status, a quote like me to get to Tom Cruise is going to be challenging. Me to get to the Tom Cruise online in the digital sphere is the version of that, like Jake Paul, I guess, is actually probably easy, like exponentially easier.
Sure. Well, I
Like,
will say, people like Jake Paul. What part of what they do is to your point of economies is you also pay for access. So
sure,
you could get to Jake Paul, but that's probably through if we were to look at his funnel, all the way through YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and I'm sure he has some sort of paywall at the bottom too, where he's like, there are probably ways, but it's all about what you're putting out cash wise. That's not going to happen with Tom Cruise. That's not, to your point.
right.
It's not an easy of a runway to understand.
And before we get into this more specifically, you know, basically what we're saying is that showing up as a digital citizen, which we're going to define in a moment, requires the same energy, presence, and care as building any in-person community. It requires engagement, responsiveness, curiosity, generosity, value adding. You know, how would you show up? How do you show up online with the same intentionality and presence that we bring into a rehearsal room, class, any sort
Exactly.
of collaborative space? And look, again, it's hard because that's why I almost think one of the best ways to view it, because look, right, it's hard to predict what I think a renaissance is coming. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know. So is it going to be actually more real world, in person Renaissance that's in response to sort of this chaos moment we're in? Or is the Renaissance happening and will continue to happen online? Right? Where are you sort of placing your bets? And, you know, if you're placing your bets in the digital realm, I just want to be very clear to show up with intentionality, care, engagement online. In my opinion, that means you're probably not going to be as intentional, caring, and engaging in the real world. So that's why I really do view it as like sort of the old model of like an office, right? It's like worker bees would go to the fucking office.
Well,
They
let me
spend
be
8
clear. Well,
hours there, and they wouldn't have a ton of friends. Maybe they would have their partner, their kids. They would invest energy there, right? But so much of their time, energy, and investment was going into this world, in this space.
well, let me offer a thought though, because I think you're right. I think you're right about this, but this is part of the Renaissance. Here's a thought, and we've said this before, so I don't mind talking it out just on this forum because I think it's interesting. What if? Oh, and obviously, it's not going to be one size fits absolutely all. But
Of course not.
what if, for the most part, artists looked at content creation as their secondary income, as going to the office? Here's why. Here's why. If every day we we looked at this through the lens of monetizing content, which is the moment, because let's be clear, when we're talking about showing up as a digital citizen, it's that's kind of what we're getting at. That's kind of what we're saying. Why are you doing this? Why are you showing up? If you're getting your work out there, you should listen to our marketing funnel episode because I think it relates to this. But if to your point about going to the office, well, what if that was the job? What
Well,
if
yeah,
what?
I wouldn't even say secondary income. I would say primary job.
Oh, sorry if I said that's old hat. Yes. Well, as you know, I've long said primary income, secondary focus. As we've been saying secretly anyway. So the point, but the point is that and Mike, we've had this conversation. If my job was to get up every day and to singularly make art and to share that online and to monetize my art and my content hand in hand, one and the same, who the fuck knows, online, then this is where I mean there's a real enmeshing of those worlds. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, because then it makes me question, like, because look, as we talk about also letting go of the industry and being self-sufficient, in a way, it seems like to me that your job as a successful artist means growing, it means an online, means showing up online. And by successful, it means somebody who's able to do it consistently, earn a living from it. And the last thing I'll say about it is, and we don't have to answer this now, like, I'm curious, like, okay, well, when you do offer physical world, what theater as a great example, what's the translation, right? It's like, how does, because it's
I'm gonna go back to the point I was making though, because I understand why you're moving past it a little bit, but I just want to make sure that it's clear what I said, because I'm curious to your thoughts
yeah.
on it's what you actually used to say about essentially treating your artists needing to consider treating their online presence as influencers. What I'm saying is, again, it's not going to be one size fits all. But are we stepping into a moment when artists should basically think of themselves as, I make money online,
Yes.
and I
And
do
not only that, I would argue my whole business is online. Here's what
right,
I mean. That's everything is online.
and therefore, I guess what I'm saying,
That's yeah.
that's what I'm saying is like is so you that's what you're doing. This to your point about going to the office, life is the office. Do you see? Because if you're doing that, if you are channeling your days, then when you get up and you play the piano or you write your poem or you go to the coffee shop or you this is all, it's one and the same.
Well, this is the question, right? Because what I think you're right about is a digital, and we're going to talk about what being a digital citizen means in a moment. But basically, what you're saying is, does there need to be a divide between the digital world and the physical world? Can there be a divide? And in fact, is it more efficient to combine them in some ways, or to, you know, I think the jury's out on that for me. I feel like, you know, there's two ways to view this, right? That it's like that they are one and the same. It's the same world. And as you live a full life, you share it online, and as you grow a community online and grow a world online that affects the real world, something in my heart is telling me that there needs to be more
Well,
of a compartmentalization
see, it's
between the
so
two.
I get it. I actually think I think your impulse is absolutely right. But the question is that the best move? Because what I hear you say, that what I hear you responding to is essentially shying away from the belly of the beast, which I respect and appreciate, because for our own health that makes sense. But the
Well, here's
question,
the difference. The difference between, because there's two different ways to live in these worlds, right? Real life, the physical world, and I'll stop saying real life, because I think what's happening online is very real, right? It's like the physical world could be a fucking Matrix 2 for all we know. It's like, but the physical world, there's experience. There's experiences, right? That's literally what the physical, that's why New York is becoming a fucking mall more and more. It's because the physical world is supposed to be about experiencing things and about, taking in things. The online world is about sharing. So that's why, to me, they feel very drastically different in some ways, because, you know, the physical, because people go to the fucking, they go to Rome, and they'll fucking share the whole thing on their phone. Are they really present in Rome? Are they really
well,
actually
again, it's a different, like, right, like what's like when someone's on playing Fortnite and they're streaming and they're having, like, that's an experience for them. And
sure.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. And I appreciate what you're saying about compartmentalization. I think part of what I'm actually asking is that, listen, I actually do think I'm a good compartmentalizer. I think I do a pretty good job of going, and now I'm working on this, and this is this part of my brain, da da da. But the truth is that it's also proves problematic for me when we're talking about things like this, because
Yeah.
when we talk about like Jelani, right? We talk about Jelani being so, seamless and effortless on socials for the most part. It's because it's part of the flow of his life. And look, we're not. I mean, we are talking about some of the pros and cons, but that's sort of not the point of this episode. Even though, got to be honest with you, it's certainly exhausting for me to think about, you know,
Well, it's
living these
public
two
and
worlds.
private, right? It's public and private, because it's like the thing that digital citizenship asks is that you become a public figure,
Right,
right?
right.
So if you are showing up as a digital citizen, what that means is that you're, of course, putting things out there, right? You're posting, you're putting out things into the world, you're staking your claim, you're saying, here I am, you're doing things, but you're also participating, which means that you are, which is another form of content, right? It's like, it's all content, in a way, but like like, we use this example, like, would you show up to an event and just stand in the corner with the megaphone? That's what it's like when we just go online to post. It's
Right.
us, showing up, and that's why we've talked about this before, but the problem with so much artist marketing is that they're pretty much off social media, or they're not engaging in a meaningful way. And then when they have a show or they have an opening or they have whatever, then they just promote it. And it's like, yeah, would you show up to, like, you know, I say, like, would you show up to a town where you're trying to sell shoes and just immediately be like, I have shoes, I have shoes, I have shoes? No, you would want to make connections in the community. You want to build trust. You would want to build credibility.
It's what
You
Harold
would
Hill
want to build
does.
relationships. Exactly.
Harold Hill sells a completely bullshit product because he invests in the community. And this is true for every business. So, you know, I was thinking about what you were just saying, though, about the point of, you know, not just promoting, you know, you don't just show up and you say, hey, I'm doing this thing, that you are actually, again, showing investment. And the reason I want to come back to this point is because I think that this is also an example of how everything has changed. Meaning, I do think at some point that there might have been a world when, yeah, you could just randomly be like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and it was accepted. Now, it's exactly what you're saying. When you go online in this world of growing an audience, the promotion, it feels, what's the word I'll use? Like a betrayal almost. Meaning, if you haven't invested in me, and here's where this has now changed the landscape, right? Because this is where owned audience really matters. None of us were thinking about owned audience 10 years ago. No one was thinking about, you know, growing audiences, and then how you cultivate that, and then how that plays into how many people might buy my album or come to my movie. But that's where we're at. And so we're talking about this, about digital citizenship, from the standpoint of growing an owned audience. Essentially, that's essentially what we're talking about: a meaningful owned audience that then can translate to people who come to your show or DDDDD.
Right. And, you know, I think we're going to talk about, like, you know, owned audience is certainly, like, you would argue, like, from the realm of, like, looking from the physical world to the digital world. That's what it is. It's an owned audience. You know, when you're in the digital world, I think you'd probably use different language, right? It's like a true community. It's a true, because, you know, it's funny, right? Like, I just finished this show, and there was, like, I knew, like, maybe 10 or 15 people who came through who I'm not, like, super close with, but, like, I would say that they're fans of mine, right? Like, they're friends, acquaintances. They came to see me, and there was mutual connections as well, you know. But I don't view them as my audience or my fans, but that's what they are, right? They are, like, you know, talking to me afterward. Like, they've seen me in several things at this point. They're like, you know, that is an owned audience in the real world. Now, when I'm in the real world, it doesn't feel like my owned audience. It doesn't feel like my fans. It feels like just like my community, my friends. I would argue that when you're online, you know, the mentality of showing up as a digital citizen is not viewing these people as, like, an audience, but as, like, just like in the real world, I don't view them as an audience. It's like, I view them as, like, oh, acquaintances, or I view them as, like, fans of my work, or whatever the fuck. You know what we're friends. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, about the fans versus audience, etc. But this is exactly my point about the through line here. That from I would argue, from an emotional place, from all we, if the perspective is, you know, Paris Hilton, when Paris Hilton was the first influencer, right? And when Paris Hilton did was really teach us about growing a community first. She invested in her fans, and they became like friends and family to her. So when we talk about this, I just don't know, especially for artists, how helpful it is to think of these things as containers, as opposed to, your
Yeah.
actual friends in your life who might come to see your show, who are fans, versus Lily Billy, who you've never met before, but says, listen, I'm a big fan of your work. How do we create boundaries for ourselves, but also make the most of those connections and relationships? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And period. I have other thoughts, but we should move on. But yeah.
Well,
Um
one thing I just want to say about, and you included this in several areas, was essentially the idea that our uh, selves online require the same sort of consideration and focus as you mentioned at the very top of this, financial management, marketing, community cultivation, all of this tenets that we always talk about. And what's fascinating to me about that is that it is its own enterprise online. That is it
right.
is its own business ecosystem. To your point about
Right.
different uh, uh, income streams and to
It's not just a tool anymore, it's a space to employ tools. And so, you know, when we talk about like professional growth, we talk about like, followers slash subscriber milestones being like, a version of that. That's a little harder, but the ones that make complete sense are like, okay, community cultivation. Just like I would show up to a play and I would try and cultivate the people in the play or grow a community or take classes or whatever the fuck people are doing. You can cultivate, there's a specific type of way to cultivate community online, engaging in discussions, whether they be Reddit, whether they be Discord, whether they be whatever, meeting people, and that literally can mean translating that from like, a discourse to the DMs to like actually meeting them on Zoom. It's like there are people that I know, people who I have relationships with that I've never met in person
same.
because of the pandemic or whatever. It's like people I've just met online. You know, how do you nurture those relationships just like you would nurture the relationships in real life?
Well, let me just
You
say
know,
something
mo-
about this. Personally, well, we know, like, I struggle with texting. I mean, I really don't know how people stay up with all the communication because
I can't.
I'm pretty good with email. I get better with text. Mike, you think I'm in my DMs? No, I don't. But it's bad. It's bad because people will not. I think there was a guy. I think last night. It's so funny. There was a guy who I coach sometimes, and he's such a sweetheart, and he always messages me after all the coachings, and he's always like, he's really kind. Thank you, loved it, and I don't respond. But it's funny because he's switching platforms to go like to have a communication with me, and I don't even engage with
Yeah.
DMs
You know me, I,
effectively.
I wouldn't use the word bad. I think it's just, it's a lot to ask for somebody to communicate across fucking 40 different platforms, to have 40 different lines of communication open.
I know, but
I
what's
don't
the
know if
point of
it's
today's episode? I know what you're saying. Like, I'm not gonna. My point is that your point about this. I don't do it. I don't.
yeah.
I don't respond to messages. I don't. I actually. It's funny. I'll post things. I'll get a ton of comments. That's the time to be engaging when the post is fresh. And sometimes I don't go back and comment for what? No, no. You're talking about sparking conversation and online, and it matters because think about it. Even the commenting for a minute. If you, Mike, comment on someone's post, and the creator, whether it's a business, an individual, they engage, you're more likely to do it again in the future because you're going to get that payoff.
100%.
If you
Well, this is
don't,
what I mean. This is why they have, to me, they're not the same for the physical world, because I think you have to invest that, because per your point, because the online world, because of the low barrier to entry, it moves so fast, which is why, like, I think maybe one ideal, right, is that, and we're going to continue to talk about, like, what this means, but like, you know, I maintain my physical health. I go to the gym. I'm healthy, right? I go online, and that is where I am primarily putting my focus in terms of, because let's be real, this is all about, we're talking about showing up as a digital citizen, but this is all, at the end of the day, there's a benefit to showing up in this world, which is ideally, this is a place that we are growing our business, which means you have to show up as a citizen. So then I would go and spend 8 hours a day, hypothetically, online, and then for the rest of the day being like, you know, I'm not worried about business in my physical world. In my physical world, I'm worried about my relationships with my girlfriends, hanging out with my friends, traveling, doing whatever, almost completely removing, like, you know, I literally go online because that is where my business is. And I like, because there's too much, per your point, to keep on top of. If you're trying to manage two separate ecosystems, two separate worlds, there's too
Exactly.
much. So
Exactly.
that's why I really do think like the transition to make, one of the transitions one can make in this moment is going like, the physical world is about enjoyment, it's about health, it's about my friendships, my close friendships, and it's about enjoying life. The digital world is about growing a holistic community, monetizing that, and, like, you know, spreading my artistic product. That is kind of how I view,
Well,
one way
look,
one can view it.
I don't disagree with you in theory. And I actually think, I really don't. I think you're right, actually. But the question is, and I actually do think that people do this very successfully. But like, take you as an example. Okay, you, you, the needs of both of those worlds, the commit, the focus, the need for structure, to organize, to separate, to make sure that you're, you know, because you're talking about two different energy flows. You know, is that feasible, is the question that I have. And I think for some people it is. I really do. I'm just challenging it in relation to you because I know you, and you you are someone who is authentically yourself a lot of the time. And I would argue, I don't know what those two things look like differently for you.
Yeah, I guess. Well, actually, let's get to that,
Okay.
because we'll circle back to this. You know, so let's actually just start to, well. Okay, so we're talking about community cultivation, marketing, right? So, you know, it used to be, again, that we thought the digital space was just a marketing tool. Now we're talking about it's actually just a space. It's not a tool. But you know, obviously, you can still market and promote things on socials. This is a big one for me. Financials, right? So the
Well,
idea.
I want to say two things before you leave the community cultivation. One is,
Oh,
to your
sure.
point.
Yeah, I was going to circle. Well, let's break it down then a little bit more then. Yeah,
Well, because this is where
like
we're
you're doing.
at, right? We're talking about like the relationship building piece online, about making sure you're commenting, engaging, the not ghosting the followers. That's what I'm saying is that I ghost my followers, and it
Mhm.
makes it challenging because then there's not going to be an investment to even share content if you're not developing that relationship there. And this one I think is really important. You know, if you're going to share your work, fine, but also share other people, share your community. What do you like? What do you like of? I do a pretty good job of this, but you know, like, what do you like of other people's stuff? Because that, and do so, you know, it's not even about like, oh, I'm trying to get something from them, but I'm just trying to the community that is doing the stuff that and let me just say what's hard about this. You know, I was actually wrote down I want to do an episode on jealousy, because I think it's hard, right? It's hard to, when you see people that you might even really like and respect, and then to share their work, because even at the core there's an element of like, what do I want to be doing that, you know, but you have to get over that fucking hump if you want to be someone who's expansive and not just making it all about you, which is essentially the point about this. And then finally, this is probably the most important point, Mike, which is, I don't know, this word comes up to me all the time. I think this is everything. It's just consistency, consistency, consistency. Very little is going to happen
100%.
without consistency. Very little is going to happen without consistency.
I want to say one thing though, that because this is really important, right? How do you okay, so we're talking about like ways to engage, right? So commenting, reacting, DMing, engaging, sharing work is a very specific way. I think starting conversations, starting discourse, because look, there's values online, right? And it's like being able to start discourse in the comments section, being able of a post, being able to start discourse on a Reddit thread, being able to start discourse, and by discourse, what I mean by that is that like people sharing, probably what this looks like is making a bold statement of some kind. It's like that meme of the guy in the park saying like da 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 da, prove me wrong. It's like, you know, just like in real life, and it's funny, right? Because Gen Z is so fucking inept at like in real life conversations, and because they're doing this online, they're spending hours. You think they would have good practice with it, right? But it's like they're spending hours arguing on Reddit about a point, or which is, that's what gets traction. Is you want to start engaging conversations where people can disagree, where they can agree. Look, one can argue that it breeds more conflict in the world, because also that's like what social media promotes, is like conflict, sort of negative discourse. I think there's a way to frame it all positively, but you want to be having big conversations online, bold conversations online. That is how, you're really, that's the content of what you're putting out there, in terms of what you're putting in a DM, in a comment, in a reaction, whatever. So financials. So I really want to say this, because look, there's taking advantage of emerging markets and commodities. The fact of the matter is that there are a million ways to monetize content. I mean, Patreon, all these different subscription services, Substack, people paying for IG Live TV, selling knowledge, right? So selling e-learning courses, selling, ebooks, selling, masterclass, or sort of like whatever masterminds that are held online. I mean, not to mention, and we're not even talking about like expertise in terms of like building an app or building some sort of software. There are just so many ways to
Well,
make
I'm so
money
sorry.
online.
Yes, and I'll say again, I know this is not going to be true for every artist, but if what we're selling now is a point of view, and if
Uh,
what content creators do is grow an audience and then become essentially brand ambassadors,
uh,
why would that not be the move for, again, most, not all, artists? Do you see what I'm saying? My point is that really what you're trying to do is sell your art. And
sure.
so when we're talking, and it's the moment of
And
monetizing
let's be
content.
specific. When we're talking about selling your art, we're talking about like in terms of like, okay, making content, whether it be movies or series or whatever, putting it behind a paywall, or putting it on YouTube and getting ad revenue, right? Finding sponsors to sponsor it online. If you're a visual artist, it's even more so, right? It's like, how are you selling, quite literally, you can sell physical pieces or prints or whatever by sharing the work, right? So, whether it's like putting it all behind a paywall, getting ad revenue, sponsorship, whatever, or literally at the end of the day physically selling a product.
Listen. We're going to do a whole episode on self-actualization too, as modern day marketing. But the reason why this is part of it, and this is your product selling knowledge too, is all I'm saying. I wake up, I make my art, I share my stuff online, I grow an audience, I essentially monetize the content through viewership, subscription channels, brand deals, whatever the hell it is. But
Yeah.
that we essentially the primary income becomes the content.
Yeah, and what you're so right about is like, look, and when you say content, that's what this all translates to, right? Because I'm thinking about, okay, an e-learning course, that's content, right? An ebook. There are people who've made millions of dollars from ebooks. That's content, right? So it's like you are selling. You could quite literally be selling art behind whatever, but also what we're saying is, per your point.
I just want to say this about the ebook and stuff, because I'm going to be 100%. Let me just be explicit. I think for most artists, this is not going to be true. Meaning that I think for people, for Dan Coe, who we reference a lot about, I think Dan Coe is a unique. He's just a random person who had some ideas and then was able to monetize those because he. And I think think about artists. Artists hate feeling like they're being sold, and artists hate selling. So, what ebook is an artist going to put together?
Right.
As opposed to what I'm trying to say, which is, again, not everybody, but for most, artists are public figures. That is what artists, politicians, that's the name of the game, whether we like it or not.
Well,
And
here's
do you
where
see
I
what I'm
disagree
getting
with
at?
you. Yeah, I do, but here's why. What we're basically talking about, there's two forms of content. There's entertainment, and then there's knowledge-based content, right? These are the two kinds. So monetizing entertainment-based content means probably racking up a lot of views, means ads and sponsorships, like especially for, let's take you and me, right? Like how it would translate to us is probably growing humongous YouTube channels. At the end of the day, that's really how we would monetize art in the traditional sense. Is you would grow humongous YouTube channels where you could put out shorts, you could put out sketches, you could put out whatever the fuck, and then you'd make money off of viewership. That is realistically probably how money is being made, right? Like, however, what I am arguing is I think that what people really pay for, yes, if you're an OnlyFans model and you're showing your tits, that's a little different. And there are people who will pay to get access behind a paywall. But here's the thing: is there's so much entertainment online. There's so much free entertainment online, and to sell your paid content, you're gonna have to put out a lot of free entertainment online, a
Yes.
lot of free stuff.
Yes.
So I think if you really want to make money online,
Yes.
all artists probably need to level up to some sort of knowledge-based selling of services, because
But I need an example, because whether it's Substack or YouTube, or again, subscription channels on Instagram, we see plenty of people who are simply selling an exclusive, get a sense of my point of view, or da-da-da. So what's an
yeah, and
example of a
I'm just curious.
knowledge-based?
I guess I'm just curious how much money those revenue streams bring in, because most of those people who are doing that, that's middle, that's like top bottom of their funnel. Ultimately, what they're trying to sell, probably at the bottom of the funnel, is some sort of knowledge-based thing. Like, let me give you an example. Something like, it could be more POV based, right? So if you're like, if you're all about Broadway queens, is it about like writing a book about that? I don't fucking know. And about like, I don't fucking know. but like, or is it about like,
Yeah,
I made a
yeah.
feature film for $50,000 and it got into X festivals, I can sell that knowledge, so it could be POV based. It could be, I've had people, it's funny. I'll give you an example. Doing this process, everybody in the cast wants me to put together a red pill document. They're like, I would pay for you to have to sign up for your Substack where you talk about sort of where you break down these like conspiracy theories for
But
like
that's point of
normal
view.
people.
This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. And actually, not only is it a point of view, it's a bit organic because I appreciate actually what you're saying. But I just want to acknowledge that I think you don't have to manufacture this so much.
Sure.
I think that the
Sure.
idea of
What's your knowledge? What's your knowledge base, or what is your point of view?
and I think point of view is just a better way to maybe even say it than knowledge because I understand what you're like. The red pill document is not knowledge based. I mean, it is because you have to think. Here's some research.
Well,
I've
people are
done.
learning. People are learning things from
Exactly.
it. Whereas it's not passive. It's not just passive entertainment in terms of watching, a web series about whatever.
Exactly.
Not saying that there's anything. Yeah, but it's a good point. I get what you're saying. Is that what you're trying to say? Is that this knowledge base doesn't have to be manufactured? Doesn't have to be like, because look, a lot of the pressure is like, well, what skills do people want to learn online, and then let me try and learn.
And we're
of artists, right?
We're talking this. Well, and we're also talking this from the standpoint of financials, and like this is kind of what I'm saying is that the red pill document is a great example of the through line between your interests in your person and online, and this to me, look. It's funny. What I appreciate about what you're talking about the compartmentalization part is, I would argue, like for literal health. For safety reasons, we might need to hold these things conceptually as separate entities. And yet, my impulse is telling me that that's not where success is going to come from in this process. That my impulse is telling me that when you're talking about that means that you're going to be putting out a lot of conspiracy-based content, and that's going to be a big point of view of yours. And the reason why I would also argue that feels kind of easy is because you spend a lot of time in that space. And so then the challenge becomes, well, how do I turn my time that I'm spending in that space into more content as I'm sitting here watching it, or I'm, whatever the heck it is, but that it feels like the two things converge, and then there's an organic approach based off of your interest in the audience you're growing. And then, if I may, here's the challenge, as we've long said. Though one of the challenges, and I think that's a great example, is that if you're going to monetize something like that, a conspiracy theory based Substack, how do you do that at the same time if the goals as an artist is to continue to share your creative work? I'm not saying it's implausible. In fact, it could be quite interesting.
We can jump back to the method thing, because what you're talking about here is what's different about the showing up as a digital citizen is you need to have a more of expansive identity. So, hold on. Oh, farted! Did you hear that? That was good.
We should take a poll for our listeners. Who loves this?
I think one of the main differences right now between the digital world and the real world, physical world, is whatever in America. It's like we have a very structured society. So everybody's sort of a cog in a machine that fits, we all have there's a hierarchy. There's especially when it comes to work, I show up and I'm the cashier. So I do this one job, right? It's assembly line economics. It's all I show up and I do my one specific job, whether that's I'm a professor, whether that's, I change tires. I think what's different about the digital realm, what ultimately does make it more exciting in some respects to me, is that that's a humongous hawk. people are investing in people more. So what I mean by that is like people don't want, because everybody knows that the digital world is full of people trying to sell you shit. If I am just the car guy, if I'm just on there trying to sell cars and that's all I'm doing, people are not going to invest in me. It doesn't matter how good my cars are. It doesn't matter how whatever. I need to let them into my more of my personal, into who I am as a person.
I'm going to take this point and run with it in a slightly different direction that I also think you're saying.
Sure.
And I'm going to take the red pill stuff as an example. If you started that Substack and that were to blow up and you started making good money off of that, here's the danger for artists and also just people in this capitalistic hellscape. Does that become the thing easily because it's paying the bills?
I don't know.
I know, but you hear what I'm saying. You hear what I'm saying, which is I'm not saying it different. I'm posing the
No. I'm just responding
because you know what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about what we've been talking about the balance here is, does that thing then, that carrot feel, and that validating carrot of cash in hand actually get in the way of what we're ultimately trying to do?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings, right, about, which is why, well, let me say this. You need to share. First off, well, here's where I think the balance is what can you talk about endlessly? Because if you're going to go and engage, I don't want to talk about, even though I am an actor and I love acting, I can't talk about acting very much. And I have no desire to go on Reddits and be like, well, here's why Stanislavski was better than Uta Hagen or whatever the fuck. So what, and by the way, that's not, as we've talked about, for artists who just want to talk about a painter who's super fascinated with, like, you know, name a Real Housewives of New Jersey and makes great paintings is far more fascinating than a painter who's obsessed with, like, the art of painting, period. And it's like, you know, we're required to have more expansive identities because people,
But let me
the point I'm trying to make is
give
that,
you an example. Let me give you an example where because I hear what you bring up a really good
and
point.
I have to be showing up. The point too is I have to be showing up because nobody cares about an actor who's not famous. Nobody cares about an actor who's not famous. What they're going to invest in is me as a person, as Mike, and all of my diverse interests. But then, per your point, and this is the point that, shout out to Ace Henderson, that's his last name. I'm forgetting it now.
Hutchinson?
No, it's not Hutchinson.
Well, just so you know, there's an Asa Hutchinson who's an actor who starred on Broadway in Water for Ellen.
No, I'm talking about Ace, who did the other BFA.
Oh, the governor of Arkansas. That's Asa Hutchinson. I'm sorry. Asa Hutchinson's the governor of Arkansas.
Good. No, but Ace, Ace shot that. I just know his, he says, he made this phenomenal point, which is, if you are an actor, talk about your interests. Make content about your interests and use your acting skill to get it across. If you are a painter fascinated about Real Housewives and that's what your interest is, paint fucking paintings about Real Housewives. That's how you're selling. That is how you.
Yes. So first of all, there's nuance here. There's no, this is the one way it is, because even that,
Sure.
I have personal. I'm not going to take that approach for reasons that doesn't feel. Well, first of all, let me say it could work great for people. I love that it can work great for you, so you do that approach.
No, I'm just saying.
For me, it's feeling a little kitschy. The sketches around the, like, it's not my vibe, but I appreciate how that works for other people. But let me say something about the red pill stuff in relation to this, because this is kind of my point. It's not that I'm not interested in the red pill stuff, but I'm actually am more interested in why you think I'm thinking of a title of your Substack essay. why what I want doesn't matter, period. I'm just going to like process wise, when we talk about this, I'm like, oh, that's interesting to me. Now I'm more your audience there, but this kind of gets the question to audience and money, which is, well, who is the audience? Because this is my point about what if the red pill stuff was there, the conspiracy stuff is there, but it's an amuse-bouche. It's a taste of the point of view.
Well, it must be.
Do you see what I'm getting at, though, about the bottom of the funnel
100%.
not being all the one thing?
Well, that I agree. Well, first off, let me say this. Every person who has done this successfully says you don't know who your audience is. You don't know. Until you have fucking 50,000 followers, you don't know who your audience is. And I agree with that. You don't, because the process is per your point about consistency, is showing up, putting things out there that are of interest to you, that you would engage with. And then tweaking as you go along, and then you will discover who your audience is, and by default you will discover what your bottom of funnel is. You'll discover what it is that you're selling. Now, what's tricky about this for artists, right, is that assumedly what we would like to monetize is creative work of some kind, whether that be a play I do in New York and I want to sell tickets, and like Gus Haggerty, people fly from all over the country to see it, whether that's a web series online, whether that's whatever, is that we kind of have already defined to an extent what we would like a bottom of funnel to be, which is like, I want to sell my creative work. But when it comes to the other diverse ways, because to be honest with you, that is probably not how you're going to make a majority of your money.
Sure. Yes.
You're probably going to make a majority of your money through other sort of things,
right?
Whether they be courses, whether they be subscriptions to something, whether they be, a newsletter, whatever the fuck. You don't know what that's probably going to be until you have enough market data.
What I just want to say, which I think is also, for those listening or watching, what's really powerful about that as an idea and important is that this is not easy. We know that.
Oh, it's so fucking hard.
And I think for a lot of people, this is an overwhelming idea.
Yeah.
When you talk about that, I think that for people, it could be like, well, what's mine going to be? Because then you start, and what you're talking about learning this is where the nuance and consistency and analyzing and improving comes in. And we know how hard that is with social media, because you want to react immediately. Otherwise, let's go a different direction. But you've got to give things time to develop for yourself as well in the process, which is just easier said than done. Okay, moving on while Mike's exploring something else. So let's talk about workflow and
method.
There's two things in relation to workflow.
I was actually looking at you. I got you out of the picture-in-picture. Anyway.
There's two things I want to talk about when it comes to workflow. And again, this is all under this idea of how you're showing up as a digital citizen. And the reason why I think this is such an important one to talk about is because this is the biggest barrier, I think, for most people, just the scope of work. Because what was once appropriate was that you post every once in a while, every now and again, you get on, hey, like you could take a real almost side approach to becoming a digital citizen or to growing your online. But now just be clear, if you're not actively online at least 5 days a week for, I would argue, a couple of hours a day, you're probably behind, quote unquote. And that's a hard realization.
And let me say this, because where it's related here in terms of method, it's like, okay, so what are the sort of like ways that showing up as a digital citizen helps your workflow? Well, number one is like, and it's not here, but like, I know this is kind of stupid, but like knowledge again, which is like,
so you're talking, we're talking right now. So you're talking about the ways that it helps
how do you
your
show up? Yeah, well, that's kind of what I meant here, is like, what are the advantages? What are the
I get what
What
you're saying.
are
You're saying, like, how does doing this improve your workflow?
in your productivity? How does
Right.
showing up as a digital citizen improve your workflow?
Sure.
And you know, I because kind of what you're getting at, which I think is also important, is like, well, how can you use your workflow to show up better as a
Or,
digital citizen? And I think they're
yeah, or
vice
like, what
versa.
workflow do you need because it's so challenging? But I think what you're saying is actually
But
kind of a positive spin.
yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is like, number one, there's so many resources online. So if you're not showing up as a digital citizen, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you are disregarding so much knowledge out there in the world. So much knowledge, so much people, and a lot of it, yes, a lot of it's bullshit, but also a lot of it's not. There's so many diverse perspectives. You are shutting off an entire world of understanding, of knowledge, of perspective when you choose to not show up as a digital citizen. You know, and if you choose not to show up as a digital citizen, I mean, you're disregarding AI, which, look, for better and for worse, AI does make so much more convenient. It makes so much more convenient. It helps your output immensely. You know, whether that's I'm thinking about maybe trying that motion thing again. You don't use it anymore. You know, didn't something about it didn't quite work for me. The motion, remember that?
Yeah. I use something similar to it, but I don't.
You know, but it's like
I
there's
mean,
so
that I
many
built myself.
that you bet your yes, right. It's like, but the whole point of motion is that it does it for you. That's the point. So it's not really motion. It's the whole point is that it is doing it automatically for you. And when you decide not to engage as a digital citizen, you are just like, you know, you're kind of like, I'm choosing not to engage with a hospital. You are kind of turning your back on a lot of things that will improve the quality of your life. These things do improve the quality of your life, you know, in a lot of ways. A lot of these, and make things easier to get through, make things easier to do. Now, the challenge, right, is that also in this world is a lot of distraction. And they're you know, they're 50-50, and it's easier to go to sort of the distracting stuff than it is the beneficial stuff, the stuff that's going to help your life and make your workflow easier and make your, you know, what I mean by
Well,
this. Is this
well,
making
again,
any sense?
I like the positive spin, and if you're not that, again, that you're missing out on beneficial opportunities from improving workflow.
Right.
I just want to also say, because part of it is like, how do you show up as a digital citizen? And workflow is a core piece of this. So Mike is sort of
Yep.
giving a perspective that's positive, but just to be super clear, AI is a tool that you can use. The other way to that many of us, and it's so, you know,
You can automate activities, create more output,
I
you
sort of
know. Yeah.
reject the notion when people I reject the notion that people are like, I'm not going to use AI. We're all using AI. I can't. I get it. I get the theory behind, like, I'm not going to use ChatGPT. Whatever. Trust me. If you're on it, all your major platforms, including the streaming platforms, they're all using AI. And so you're feeding into AI whether you want to or not. If you do live your life, but AI is the future, and if used effectively, it could be a really powerful tool. I want to say again, as part of this, I'll just offer for those listening, building a through line in your day to day, in your life, in your interests, whether it's cooking or your dog or the garden or conspiracy theories or your relationships or the art you're making. That it's hard for me to hold these things in different containers, because what would suffer likely? Consistency. Because
So what
consistency,
does that look like?
right.
What does
It
this all look like when you're talking about building a through line?
means I wake up and I post. It means before I go to bed, I post. It means I get out of the shower and I have a funny thought or an idea or a thing and I post. It means that my life, my physical life, becomes my digital life.
Well,
And
what you're talking about is documenting. There's this theory that I don't know much about. I mean, that's what you're saying. You're basically saying, which I think is good, but
well,
I mean, it's the
because
lowest
how do you
barrier to
do it?
entry.
Because what do you do? Because look again, Mike. Listen. Yes, 5 years ago, I think being like Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 10:30 a.m. content creation time. So when I sit down and
Mhm.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we're beyond that. When we're talking about an episode on showing up as a digital citizen online. Listen, I could be sitting on the back of a bus commenting and DMing, but when we're talking about output of content, obviously it's going to look different for everybody. But when we're talking about stories, when we're talking, the alternative for me is building out a massive content creation calendar that is all pre-planned, that I'm sure could really work for some people. But given the chaotic nature of our lives, and now we're doing this, and the impulsivity and the emotionality, my sense is I wake up, good morning, online community. And so
Yeah.
that's what it makes sense to me.
I mean, yeah, I don't, to be honest with you, look, I do not know enough about it. I feel like, I mean, there's a lot of people who say that a great way to start this is by simply documenting, is by simply, everything I do, I post about it. I post about it. Okay, now I'm going to get tea. I love tea. Or now I'm meeting a friend for lunch. Okay, taking a picture of that. I'm
And
about
by
to
the
step
way,
into a meeting,
just to
taking a
say,
picture of that.
even if you don't post it, and you want to keep your mic a little closer, even if you don't post it, what you're talking about, there's so much power in that, because what you're talking about, Mike, is getting potential content too. So because that's a huge barrier for most people. So even if you're not posting it in the moment, but you're like, I'm just use my phone and my camera to be documenting my life that I could download later.
Yeah, I mean, Gary V
Yes,
sets up a fucking camera
exactly,
and just live streams his whole day.
exactly.
I mean, it's the lowest barrier of entry way to do it, and I don't know enough about, so we're talking really about like a version of that, either to an extreme or like a light version of that, or you're talking about really clear boundaries around like 9 to 5 every day is my time to be online. I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't know enough about sort of those two, but because those are really the two options, right? Like in varying spectrums, those are kind of the two things that really, or to do a combination of
Well, it's
both,
just
right? To
funny.
do like sort of a hybrid of
I'm
both.
just reflecting on our own journey in the conversation about this over the years, and my conversation and watching and going, I think like a content calendar at one point was a thing that really worked. And
Well, I don't think it would be a calendar. I think you would have designated time. I'm not saying that you plan out what you're going to do. It's like I go to the office and yeah, maybe I have a couple things I know I'm going to do that day at the office, but really it's just to have the time to show up and do whatever it is. I'm not saying you need to plan out every minute of that, but what you're talking about is the difference between it's less about it's more about boundaries than it is about like how you're filling the time. It's more about like, okay, 9 to 5 I'm online and I'm making content and showing up and doing that and then I'm done. Or is it like, do I somehow, per your point, incorporate documenting my real life more organically
and what I'm
into the two?
saying is that for our class of folks, the artists, I would argue
I
that
don't know.
right, fair.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's definite. I'm just looking at my life, our lives, looking at what we know the lives to be for most artists, and going, because well, what's the alternative?
Well, neither of us have done it. So either or. So I don't think we really know. But for a fact.
And
I
why?
feel
Why
like,
haven't you done it?
well, you're talking about what the block is. I think it's honestly has to do with the fact of management, time management, about committing to too many things per your point in both of these realms. So per your point about like, okay, is it the solution to combine them, or is the solution to actually divest, which is kind of what my hypothesis is, I don't know, to divest more of the physical world business and to invest more into the digital world as my business, and to sort of say that is where I'm putting my growth energies. I feel like I'm doing too much. I feel like there's too much going on. That's always the issue.
Well, this is what I'm
Is
saying. This is actually what I'm saying, if I may. Let's say you were to divest the physical world and lean into the online. Well, how does that affect the physical world? And what if? And you're right. This is just a hypothesis, maybe. And for some people, forgetting the physical world in relation to the online world is the move. And I could totally see it in some circumstances for especially non-artists. It's hard for me to see an effective version of that for an artist, given you just closed a play. You know, it's easy fodder. Well, that was just 7 weeks of your life or whatever. And this is where it's different for artists in particular, is we go into these cycles all the time, and now I'm in the in-between, and
yeah, sure.
how do I flow with that in a way that feels organic and
Yeah, that's fair.
accessible?
That's fair. And look, I guess, yeah, what you're right about is because our physical worlds are always in flux. Now, look, would they be in flux as much if we had a stronger digital world? I don't know. Here, what I mean by that is, would I have to go take gig work? Would I have to go say yes to jobs I don't really want? Not that I didn't want this job, I wanted it, it was great. If I was making money online and making art online, and that was would I have to, would my physical world be more in flux? I mean, the dream that I realize is I'm saying that's totally glorified, is that physical world is like home. Physical world is like home. It's like when I'm coming home. And it's like I get to enjoy my time, enjoy my friends, enjoy the world. Like digital world is like office, and that's sort of the idealized version in my
Right. Of
head.
course, for me
But
too.
is it, but is it like, but that means, but let me just say this, what that literally means is that boundary's clear. I'm not trying to fucking go see every play in New York City and trying to grow physical relationships in the business here. I'm fucking done with that, because if I can do that online, there's going to be a
No
better
one wants to
translation
see
into the
that,
physical.
but that's what's interesting. People want to see you in your backyard in your chair with your little dog. That's what people want to see.
uh
I mean, think about it. It's what you're saying. People don't care if you went to see real women have curves. No one cares. Like, that's a blip in the day. What they're interested in is all the other stuff. And then, to your point, on our point, we're talking about showing up as a citizen. Like, then when you start to say, "Oh, and guess what, guys? I'm starring in Real Women Have Curves now." You know, then there's going to be more of an interest
I'm
in
playing an
even.
ICE agent.
Ticket sales are slow, so they're trying to make it more relevant.
I'm playing a super skinny ICE agent. And Real Women Have I'm playing a hot, jacked ICE agent
Named Trish.
named
I don't
Trish.
know why it's a woman. Anyway, but listen,
This is going far.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I think this is listen. I'm glad we're talking about this because I think this is such a massive.
Look, you're probably right. Let me tell you something. You are probably right that at least in the beginning, and by beginning I mean probably for 3 years.
And by beginning, I
Like
mean
until
forever. No, yeah.
no, but like until you have, like, because listen, like and until you have like, I feel like, again, and what's the metrics for all of this? Because there are people who make livings with 5,000 followers, but like in the beginning, which means like growing in, which translates to like how many people follow and are interested in you, how many people are in your world and community. Probably, documenting probably is, people say, and I've never tried it really. I've never tried this documenting process, which I understand it as being like, because that's the thing, right? Is because right now, like for instance, I'm gonna go cater today, right? I can't divest from the physical world because I'm making my money in the physical
I
world.
know, but if I
So
may,
it's
that's what I'm saying. But
unrealistic.
we want to see that. We want to
Well, let
see
me just
you
say
hitting the vape
exactly.
in the back before you. Like, that's interesting.
Exactly. Well, and what I'm trying to say is that it's probably not realistic because you have so much more invested in the physical world to separate them. It is probably easier as a barrier to entry to document what you're doing in the physical world and showing, and then still showing up and engaging online, commenting, DMing, causing discourse, whatever.
Well, where I think we're showing our age, I just want to say
I gotta take a shit. Sorry.
part of where I think we're showing our age in this too is we know that that's the case. What do I mean? Look at this is what we see people doing.
That's true.
They have their own boundaries. We're just a little slow.
Well, it's so not intuitive. Well, the thing is it's not. It is so not intuitive for either of us, which is why we are still not really. It's because it's so not part of our.
Exactly. No, this is exactly right. And why I think it's worth the conversation, because we're not alone in this. There are many people, and again, we're just not 20 years old. And so this episode is really.
Or we didn't grow up, but it's like people who do the people who are most successful. It's funny. If you look at the people making the most money online, what do they all have in common? Most of them are gamers. They grew up playing video games because they understood, they understood this concept, that they lived in almost this, they were able to occupy this space and grow a community in this space, and they were invested in this world in some respect. A lot of these people are gamers, whereas like I was more of a kid who was like out with my friends,
Right, of course.
not being a loser.
Exactly.
And like, so I was joking, but
So the other thing about the other final thought about growing online, becoming a digital citizen, and we already talked about this, is just expanding your identity. And I actually do think this is really important. This is like the red pill stuff as an idea about and this goes back to the same idea actually of the through line, which is like share your interests, right? What is your was you're going through the day, how it's not, to your point, I'm not just at oh, here's look at my guest star Tate for Chicago PD. Who cares? That's what we want to see, the day to day. We want to see the point of view of, me and my favorite Broadway queens, or you and why you think the FBI killed JFK, or whatever. That actually is interesting, and it's an easy way to just broaden and also develop a more interesting story. Because what is also holding true is that no one really, really cares about your building your career as an actor. And I gotta say, I don't know if this is true for you, I always give major kudos to those artists who do that. It is wild to me, the artists. I'll say a name and then we can bleep it out. But oh my God, I don't know if you track that content, but it is wild to me.
but she doesn't work.
Well,
she doesn't work. These people don't work. No, but the people who are, I'll bleep these. Yes. Yes. These people don't work.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you.
So that's telling. I mean, they're tracking their journeys to be Broadway stars or whatever. and that's what their whole thing is, but they don't work.
Yeah.
What about that? What's that black girl's name? The one who we were talking about helping us. Yeah, she doesn't work.
I know.
None of these people work.
But this is kind of underlines the point. Like, it's not the vibe. You want to expand your interests.
No.
Period. Let's talk though about we're talking about it, but let's get into this a little bit more about what essentially holds us back from being a good, effective digital citizen, because I think it relates. And you can say you want to pause at any point, Mike. That's a-okay.
No, I don't want to. Okay. No.
So one of the things that holds us back, I do think it's kind of this piece. There's a lot of fear. It's vulnerable to. I'm good at this on TikTok. I'm not good at this on any other. On TikTok, I'll just throw paint against the wall.
Right.
To see what's going to stick. But I'm not as willing to do that on other platforms because there is a fear, right? There's a fear of of what that content translates to, of coming across as desperate or being cringe and wanting it to be authentic.
Well, this is what Gary Vee says is the number one reason why people are not successful online is because they're afraid of what people think about them.
Yeah.
And I think it's really true.
It's sad. It's sad because it's true for all. I mean, at least it's true for me.
Yeah, I think it's sad. I think it's like, well, look, I think what's beautiful about the challenge is that I think like there is potential where if you can be your unfiltered self online, perhaps that will translate into the real world. And a good like the more authentic you can be online, perhaps the more authentic you can be in real life.
Interesting. Interesting.
And or not, or the exact opposite happens where people are fake online and then they're not. But what we're talking about here is like authenticity is a huge value, plus, that's what's valued online. But perfectionism is another reason why people, they don't know what to say, so they say nothing. They don't know what to post, so they don't post anything. Whereas kind of per your point, like, especially when it comes to like documenting, just waking up and being like, I'm talking to Joshua right now. Like, that's not, like, who's going to want this? Who's going to like this? But you need to get into the habit.
But also,
and the
do
consistency.
think that's what's interesting. I do think people want that.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. There was a time when people would go, who cares what I'm eating for cereal? Now that's all they want to see. Because I feel like we're craving more actual, more that's real, more that as real as we can get it. And so it's actually the bullshit, the accidents, the quote unquote, the stuff that we don't want, that feels like nothing, that is the stuff that people want, not overly produced. And so your perfectionism, if that is something that's holding you back, is not only holding you back from posting anything, it's not what people want.
Yeah, no. And people are not connecting in real life as much, so they're using social media for the appearance or the feeling of actually having those real experiences. You're living,
Now, I wonder if this next one is true for you, in terms of, because you're taking us a brief social media break, or not brief, whatever. But we have here this jealousy or comparison one, where what holds us back, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is they feel like it is a real negative in their life because they look at it and it feels like a tool that creates comparison or jealousy. Is that true for you at all, or what was also the reason you're taking a break?
Far less than it was. I feel like but yeah, that's definitely true because people are again presenting curated versions of their lives. So jealousy is definitely a piece of it. It's why I got off was really because of, I guess it must be because of, to frame it in a way of like, if we want to say I should be doing it, then it's perfectionism, which is like, I think one thing that we have not written here is that another reason why it's hard to show up as a digital citizen is because the app is designed, these apps, these digital platforms are designed for us to consume in.
Yeah.
They're not designed for us to create in. It's far easier to become a consumer and use these platforms and use these tools to just consume shit than it is to intentionally use them and put shit out. So why I got off it was because if I'm going to use social media, I want to use it with intention and with intention. And I don't feel like I have the space to do that right now. And I'm using it more from a consuming perspective than I am from a putting things out and being an active participant perspective. So until I feel like I have the capability to do that, because, this thing about burnout we have here, it's like the expectation of the amount of output you're supposed to put out there can be overwhelming. And it's like, all you can do is start where you are. I would much rather intentionally post less frequently than just and not be on my phone than just consuming mindlessly all day, I guess. But it's hard because it moves so fast. It's all about output, blah, blah, blah. There's this feeling of you need to be everywhere. You need to constantly be putting stuff out there, constantly releasing content, and that is another reason why it's difficult to show up. But the jealousy thing for me has been far less lately than it has been.
Well, we have here, and I'll briefly talk about my block when it comes to specifically growing a community online. And I do not like immediacy in terms of expectation of communication.
Right.
I've said this, this about me. I feel it's a very uncomfortable feeling that people have an expectation for me to respond immediately. And so, and I am a very insular person. I like to be alone. I like my space, and it is really hard for me energetically to put so much time and energy into the online space. Kind of to your point, I wrote this like not knowing. I don't know really how to effectively navigate it all the time, so it's easy to go down a rabbit hole of where have I been for 45 minutes, and so it has been, and what it really boils down to for me, Mike, is I don't have a practice. I don't have a consistent practice that I have adopted and understand well enough, and therefore it's been manic and random.
You don't feel in control. Like if you had more of a structure and a practice, you'd feel more in control around how you're engaging in that space. And that's actually mainly what I feel right now too,
So go ahead, please.
Yeah. No.
I was just going to say, I was moving on to this, I think this is actually a positive though. This essentially becoming an online digital citizen maybe asks us to redefine what success means online. And I think this is actually nice because in some ways it's less about followers, right? So in this instance, then we've reached a moment when maybe it's not about, I have 2.5 million followers, but I've got 26,000 followers, and it's a really meaningful community. It is a community of people in my world who care about what I have to say, and I care about what they have to say, and it's actually most effective so that when I do sell my Christmas album, or when I do say, hey, come check out this thing, those 26,000 followers, there might be 300 of those people that are really there for me. And that is quite nice, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think like, there are people who make millions of dollars online who have, 3,000 followers, so, and I don't say that to be, I say use that as a metric to go, it doesn't necessarily, just like in real life, it doesn't necessarily, or in the physical world, it doesn't necessarily matter how many people you know. It could matter more like who it is that you know and how deep those relationships run. And we could assume that it might be similar in the digital space as well.
Well, this is where I'm going to go back to something you said, and I'm going to push back. But I for the, in a lot of our private conversations, this happens where I push back on a thought that, quote unquote, we haven't done something. And I push back on it because, and I'm going to relate it to this, because whether it's 2 followers or 2 million followers, that's not the point. It's if you have a body of people, the 3,000 people that follow me, I don't think it's that. I don't know what it is. 28. I don't know what the hell it is. But yes, that's not an impressive, relevant number to someone going, oh, is this? I understand that, but that has still been in the 10 years or so that I've been online. That's what I'm working with. That took X, Y, or Z amount of work, and those people matter. And the question then becomes, when in those flows of periods of growth, what has been at play? I'm just saying this because I think this is an important point, that it is not about that success is little less about just follower numbers for other people and more about the depth of the relation to which you have them. And so all I'm saying is we have different experiences. I understand, that it's not influencer virality level, but that's not even what we're speaking about.
Sure. I mean, but the only thing I'll push back on that about is like, are we engaging those people digitally? Because those are relationships that came from the physical world.
Some,
like
not all, at all.
Most. And it's like, I think for me, most at least.
Yeah.
Have I nurtured those have I built digital relationships with those people?
It's a slightly different point. There are absolutely many people online who follow me, who engage with me, who I don't know who they are. And
that's true, I guess.
Now that's a problem, to your point, and I actually the same point. I mean, it's the real point is that I say is that it's what haven't we done is the question I ultimately ask in relation to this, especially given this point about redefining success in this moment and I would just argue that I'll just go ahead and say what I have not done a good job of and what I don't do a good job of in relation to this is doing exactly what you're saying, which is developing a meaningful relationship with the people who have taken the time to invest in me and my journey.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
So we included this part here about practical ways to show up, and I do think this is important.
Yeah, I mean but the only thing is this is all over the place because we've talked about different, we've kind of broken it down that there's sort of these 2 ways. There's like you're either documenting and building it more organically into your life, or you have set time. Those seem to be
well,
the 2 ways that you could do a hybrid of or do either or. Those seems to be sort of the 2 ways that this looks practically.
But let's just take yourself as an example, because I think everyone's going to be different. So, for example, for you, because we have this about being more intentional, right? Or like when you think like when you go, okay, this is how I'm going to become more intentional, or this is how I'm going to ramp back up into. Have you given that thought at all about what that could look like for you?
What I'm assuming, again, the ideal version is that I create more stability in my physical world in some respects. And then I am able to probably set aside, probably starting small, 3 hours a day or an hour a day or 2 hours a day. Well, because where I am going online to engage, comment, DM, whatever. And also part of that 2 hours is probably posting something, anything. then that eventually probably grows into like, longer and longer chunks. That is sort of my hypothesis at this point, is that, having dedicated time. But per your point, the documenting could be easier, right? Where it's like, well, no, I don't have designated set time. As I just go about my day, I share.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I don't know enough about the documenting process, but
Well,
like,
look, we're just
yeah,
offering different options. Like what you're talking about, just to lift up. I'm going to list this for the listeners. If you might have to start with small structure, that's what you're saying. Small structure, and you're talking about structure
correct.
and consistency. Oh, 2 hours a day, which I would argue is a lot of time. That's a big in my opinion. That's a huge commitment to say 2 hours a day. So for someone, it might be 15 minutes, just to be honest with you, to go to start small, to even build the habit. You're also, if I may, talking about the potential of compartmentalization of what the work is, i.e., engagement or content creation, or I'm actually just looking for inspiration, sometimes just scrolling to get a sense of trends or what people are actually
Yeah.
engaging with, so compartmentalizing that time a bit. To your point about the 9 to 5, are there strict windows where, as we become more of an online digital uh, person, do we have to not do what I wake up, sleep, but in fact go, you know what? I'll be active, but for these 8 hours a day, and that's it. You know,
I don't know, and that's why I'm not trying to say, I'm
no, we're
saying
just
like I want to
musing. We're
look more into
we're not.
the
I'm not.
documenting thing because I'm
But
curious about that. We're
just so
not disagreeing about
I
anything. I don't
know.
know why you're.
Well, because
Yeah,
exactly, we're not saying this is the only what you have to do. We're talking about all
yeah.
the
I'm not saying that at
yeah,
all.
and the documenting. It's funny, the documenting thing. I you're just talking about like taking snaps, pictures, and videos of like throughout the
Well,
day.
yeah, that's what I gathered. When you're talking about more of an organic experience, and combining the physical and the digital world more so, and not having it be so compartmentalized, that what I interpret that as is that you're talking about documenting, which
I would
means
just argue that
as
that's
I
kind of advanced. So like I'm meaning like to your point, it kind of like to your point, for many people, getting to the documenting phase might be 8 months down the line.
oh, interesting. Just so you know, how normally it's posited is that that's actually a good what I'm agreeing with you on is that's actually a good beginner step, because it is more of a organic, it is more of a less compartmentalized way.
But part
Is
of what
that
I'm thinking about is, does that just feel like too all consuming? And so because if I may, part of what I'm trying to get at in my hypothesis is that documenting one is the ultimate. So therefore, if does creating more structure and boundaries, so like we have here, like every Friday I'll shout out this other artist, or little frameworks for yourself, does that's probably not it, because that probably is still keeping it at arm's length, but that might be the best way in.
yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know. I feel like I could see, because I feel like if you're gonna, another great way to do this, listen, probably something we don't have here, but it's similar to, I'll shout out this other artist, is give yourself a touchstone, so a podcast or like a blog series or something like that forces you to have to go. You're creating something where it's not just, oh, if I feel like it or I put it in my calendar, it's like, if I create something where it's like, I announce I'm doing an IG live every Monday, and I announce that, and that's out there. Now I'm going to be pressured into showing. That's probably one of the best ways you could do this, is giving yourself like a real physical, tangible consequence
Like your Monday
of not showing,
movies. I mean, I guess
like Monday movies.
that wasn't really a
No, but
consequence, but
no, well, there was. Well, people, I did it for 5 months or whatever. People grew to expect it. I did ask people far in advance, so people were so I was forced to have to do it.
why'd you stop doing that
And
again?
I don't know. So, on the path, here of finishing the episode. So,
But we love you, and we
um,
don't want to just get through you.
there's 2 hours. People know we care. We're getting to 2 hours here. They know we care. If they don't know we care by now, then they're idiots.
But I also, I think this next point is interesting. This idea of building the kind of community that you want to model.
Yeah.
Right. That again, you are the same. Our whole theory with community cultivation is about, watering your garden, taking care of the community that you want to take care of you. And we have here, I like this phrase, I don't know if you wrote it or me, but it's
You wrote it.
it's the algorithm and it's the energy. So the algorithm wants you to engage and show that you're not, and then it rewards you. But it's also the vibe of what it means to grow a community. To if you're going to expect anything, you have to give back to it. You have to feed it. You can't just expect it to come to you. And what's interesting, and I do think this is interesting, is that for most artists, this is what they want. In many ways, artists are community builders. That's what they do. They build around their point of view. This is kind of my thing about content creation and monetizing it as part of it. that if we take a holistic approach, an organic holistic approach to going, well, who are the kind of people that I want in my life, and feeding that community, it'll come back to us. We have here, it isn't just about being an influencer. It is about being visible, valuable, and connected in some ways.
Yeah, isn't this what we wanted? Isn't this everything that we wanted in some respect? Like, people probably 1,000 years ago would have killed for this. They would have killed for having the opportunities that we have right now. And
well,
it's like,
Mike, I think this is really important what you're saying, because I think, and it kind of takes me back to your positive reframing, which I appreciate, because I think that most of us, even the people who are quite successful online, have a negative connotation of what it means to be online.
Sure.
For good reason. And we talked about a lot of them today. But the truth is, and what I think Gary Vee frames really well, actually, is just the power behind it, is what's possible. Is when used effectively with boundaries or whatever it is, and because it look different from person to person, it is a tremendous tool. And so I'm pausing because I'm thinking about some recent moments when I've been online and I get frustrated or mad because I'm jealous of this person and the negativity that pops up for me. And like, of course, that's true. That's true for in some instances. But in order for us to do this, to develop an organic community, to turn that into monetization, real monetization, there's a real perspective shift that's needed here.
Yeah.
A real mindset shift.
It requires immense discipline. The online space requires immense discipline. That I think is the key difference, because it is designed to and this is where I will take a negative framework. It is designed to distract you. It is designed to suck you in. It is designed to hook you.
Yeah.
Now, there's so much potential there, right? There's so much potential. And by the way, a lot of benefits for me too. What I've learned, I've learned so many things, and, certain relationships that I would not have. And so it's not all bad. There's gold underneath all the shit. But the problem is when you're operating on default in this space, it's a dangerous place for your mental health, and because you start to divest from the physical world, and you're not but you're not adding anything, you're not making anything, you're just consuming, you're just passive, and so I say this because it requires a lot of discipline to get to the positive, the positive stuff in it. And that, whereas our physical world is surprisingly more structured in some ways, it's much more easier by default to at least like oh, get a job at McDonald's and like whatever. It's like if you're operating on default in the physical world, like you'll still manage to like find your way around and be somewhat independent and have somewhat of a sense of self, whereas the digital world, it's much harder to do that. So that for me is a key difference.
Yeah, I totally heard. Well, we hope this has been helpful for you in thinking about your own relationship to the online space. It's a massive conversation, and I think the more we talk about it, the more it reveals. Period. Okay, comfort food performances.
So, do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Go first. Go ahead.
I just did an audio book. There's this writer named Harlan Ellis, so I think was in the 70s. And so I'm choosing a short story as my comfort food performance. He wrote a short story called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream," and it's a fucking wild. It's I don't know how long it is. Like the audio version of it's like maybe 45 minutes. He wrote it in 1967 in like a sci-fi magazine, and it's all about this. Basically, it's a post-apocalyptic world where every country has built a supercomputer, an AI supercomputer, and the one in America like took over all of the supercomputers and now runs the world and has killed everybody on Earth except 5 people. And it tortures those 5 people. And somehow like they're immortal. They can't die unless, because everything has been automated, like it can control the physical world they live in. And it's just a really weird, trippy, disturbing. It's a fascinating story.
I love the title.
And it's just amazing. Yeah, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's so fucking. I really recommend it. It's just sad. Okay, what's yours?
Very much in the same vein, actually. We watched Mamma Mia, which I had never seen the movie of Mamma Mia. I had never. I don't like movie musicals. I'll tell you why I like this movie musical. This is a successful because I don't want to see Sweeney Todd on. Why is he singing? What's he doing? It's ridiculous to me. I've never seen Les Mis, Phantom. I can't watch him. Mamma Mia.
It's like when they're gritty. It's like when they're gritty and real. It's like it's gay.
It's painful. Exactly. It's not it. Mamma Mia. Doesn't make any sense. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't, and it's irreverent. But specifically Meryl Streep, it's actually a very good performance. You know what I love about Meryl Streep? Just in one thing, and then it relates to this. She's just she understands. I can't judge. I just got to go. There seems to be never fear in her performances. Whether it's Julia Child or Mama, she's just sort of like, I don't know, I'll be Julia Child. Like she's just sort of so free. And in this,
I agree.
So the ABBA musical, it's ridiculous. But she really, when watching her sing "The Winner Takes It All," she's like, I just got to go there. Who cares? I'm getting paid $3 million. I'm on, in Mykonos. I'm on the side of a cliff. I'm against the backdrop of who cares? I'm just going to go. And
she just does it. Yeah.
It's great. So we really enjoyed it. So I love the movie, and I don't like movie musicals. And I thought Meryl Streep was great.
I love the old movie musicals, like Singing in the Rain. You don't love Singing in the Rain?
Mike, no. Let me be clear. Singing in the Rain, Maine, The Music Man, The Amazing Fiddler on the Roof. Part of what made these movies so good was how practical. White Christmas. They're practical. There's actually Singing in the Rain is a set. I have actually more of an issue.
Yeah, they're shot theatrically.
Exactly. Yeah. I really have an issue when they, for whatever reason, when they try to take it away from like the stage, it doesn't play for me personally. In the Heights, Michael can tell you, the opening number finished, and I was like, good night. Good night. I can't. It's not for me when they're like the drones are capturing them as they are going through Washington Heights. I don't know. I don't know. Just put it on the Broadway stage, and then I'll watch it.
Did you like Wicked?
I really liked Wicked. Now, Wicked, if I may, It's so fantastical. This is my point. It's
Yeah.
so otherworldly that when they're singing, you're kind of like, well, yeah, she's coming in a bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
I have an issue for what
When
Chicago
they try to ground it.
amazing because it's like,
Yeah.
you get it. It's the framing.
Yeah, I get it. Well, it's how they exactly. You're right.
So anyway, okay, friends, see you later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.